to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. Hey, and good morning. We usually record in the afternoons, and this time we're doing a morning recording, so it feels great to wake up and start the day thinking about a conversation.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It is. Maybe we should do these first thing. It will give us more energy, but we always have fun. So all good. Look, this week I am incredibly thrilled to welcome a very special guest. He is the professor of law at Queen's University and an adjunct faculty member at Cornell Law School. He is the director of Conflict Analytics Lab, which is a consortium for AI research on law and conflict resolution. And more importantly, he is the chief of policy at the Deel Lab for Global Employment, a policy institute on global work. So welcome, Mr. Samuel Dahan, to the show.
Hi, Pete. Hi, Judy. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. We're excited to have you. And I'm so excited to be talking about global employment, EOR, and really just digging into what's going on over at Deel, because I think there's a lot of folks that have questions, and we want to get those out. So really happy to have you here. Sam, one of the things I'd love to do is have you tell us a little bit about your amazing career. You I want to ask you, how in the world did you ever see yourself or end up in the HR world? But tell us a little bit about your career and your work and what you do at the in your consortium leadership.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I didn't see myself ending up in the HR world, but I'm discovering it, and it's actually quite exciting world. Yeah, so now I'm a law professor at Queen's University in Canada and at Cornell Law School in the United States, and I'm leading the Deel Lab, and I created the Conflict Analytics Lab, which is a legal AI consortium. But prior to that, I was a litigator. I was first in private practice, and I spent quite a few years as European Union officials, mostly working as a cabinet member at the European Court of Justice. So I did a bit of employment law, civil service, labor law, European Union, social policies. So I've been quite connected to the HR world indirectly, but that's my connection to the labor and HR space.
Yeah, very good. So you've studied a lot of this, I imagine, right? The construct of law and labor, around each of those. But I'll tell you, I'm not a lawyer, but I've certainly been around a number of case studies when it comes to both my education and otherwise, and I always found them very fascinating. The outcomes can be different, right? And it is fascinating, just the world of work itself in and of itself. So, so Sam, tell us a little bit about Deel. I know Deel very well, but I'd love for you to just sort of talk about what Deel does, who they are, and where they fit into the HR ecosystem of today.
Yeah. No, I've known Deel for quite a few years because I've known the founders for quite a while, and we've been talking about this initiative. I mean, when it was just an initiative, not a unicorn. And from my perspective as an employment lawyer, we can talk obviously about the financial aspects, the fact that it's an incredible success and so on. But for me, I like to look at labor compliance and labor law issues. It's fascinating because they are solving a very interesting problem with global work. So, and this is a problem that has never been really addressed before. And I see this mostly at two levels. So yes, it's a full stack HR management service, but I'd say it is more like divided in two levels. At the hiring level, prior to Deel and other ER companies, it was very complex to hire someone outside your legal system. Right? So if you could hire someone outside your legal system, but you only could hire them as a contractor. So now there's this employer of record option, which resolves a big problem, which is the problem misclassification. Right. So that's a very that's an enormous issue. That's probably as old as the creation of the notion of work, right?
Yes.
So then the second level, which I find fascinating, also it solves an important problem during the work relationship, which is sometimes even more important than just the hiring aspect. So it is helping companies not only to hire compliantly, it's maintaining a certain level of compliance. It's encouraging a company to abide with local labor laws. So, and that's, again, it's a very complex problem, especially for smaller companies that cannot or that do not have yet a legal entity in another legal system. And a legal entity is only one, it's a tiny piece of the iceberg.
Right.
The other aspects, I mean, just taking care of pension rights, benefits, even IP, tax, and I'm not even talking about termination. So these are very complex, and many companies cannot really afford to have a full-time HR professional, let alone a global HR professional. So it is, in my opinion, solving many employment law problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the fact that today's employer have so many different ways of solving for their needs and creating opportunities for themselves. And I'm a huge, huge fan of the EOR marketplace and the model itself. But tell me a little bit about how Deel Lab fits in with Deel's mission, right? So Deel's on a mission to help global employment be easier, it sounds like. Where does the lab come into that, and how do they work together?
So the lab was established a year ago, but it's been in the pipeline for quite a while. So the lab has two missions. The Deel Lab has one mission, which is to advance innovation in compliance tech, and I can talk a little bit about the kind of AI technologies we're working on. And our second mission is to advance knowledge in global work policy. So it's been and global work policies is extremely important right now because there's a lot of lacking regulation. There's quite a bit of gaps in the regulation. So and I'm not talking about employment law only. I'm talking also about immigration policies, intellectual properties, equity compensation. So many of these issues, especially if you're using an EOR, not that they are problematic, they just are not. There are no answers in the regulation. So I think it's important for us as active or leading industry a stakeholder to take an active role and work with academia, work with policy experts and other industry partners to reflect on these issues and to produce actionable knowledge on these aspects.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been studying the global EOR marketplace since probably about 2016, 17. I started writing some articles on it. I started sniffing around it. And I'm a huge fan, right? I came from the PEO world, the domestic US PEO world, where I saw the value of that vehicle for organizations to do the right thing and lay a foundation of very mature HR capabilities at a young age in their organization. And I think that the EOR model is very similar, right? And to your point, what I love about it is it's both a human opportunity enabler, but it's also an org agility enabler for companies to be able to quickly step into an environment in a new country where they may not have business nexus and not even have any real knowledge of the location, and do it in a great, in a way that is proper, right? It sets up a mechanism for people to do things the right way. And I know there's been a lot of folks that feel like, oh, well, eventually, entities are going to sniff this out and they're going to say, well, and try to attack it. And there have been some, I think, legislative changes, right, in Mexico, I think in Germany, and others where they have tried to make some concessions around how it works. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it provides the proper path for people to employ workers and do so in a way that generates the revenues that these entities certainly want. I know they want to protect their people, but they also want that tax revenue. And it keeps organizations from going down the wrong path of engaging people. But to your point, there's not every country actually has a law that specifically focuses on EOR to my knowledge. Is that right?
No, in fact, there are only quite a few. I mean, the most advanced legal system for that is the Netherlands, maybe a little bit Germany. France has some regulation, but also I think a lot of these issues are misunderstood. I think a lot of governments don't quite understand yet the concept. I mean, I think sometimes there is a confusion because some of them or some stakeholders might see the EOR as some kind of a temp agency system, which is quite different. So it is not resolved. It's still a complex question in the labor law community. It's not even, and in many, if you look in many academic papers, policy papers, the issues, I know in HR, it's a pretty hot topic. It's been a hot topic for quite a while. But believe it or not, many of my colleagues don't even think about these problems because they are not really in the agenda.
Yeah, right. Until they don't know they have a problem, probably until they step out into that world. And I think a lot of companies put, just like payroll, right? They put new market entrances from an HR perspective through the filter or the lens that their home country is, and that's not always going to translate in every location. And I think that's just another beauty of the EOR model, is where it can guide you to that right answer. And look, I'm a huge fan. Like I said, I think it's HRO's best kept secret. I think more CHROs need to learn about it. But what does concern me is, and Julia, you and I have talked about this a lot, is just the low barriers to entry and the amount of new entrances to this market with very little differentiation. And a lot of times, possibly not a lot of capability behind what they're bringing to market. So I worry that there's going to be this sort of stumble by a provider that is going to make it bad for everyone, right? Because they're going to give a bad reputation to the model for everyone else. And so I really hope that I want to see the community of providers protecting this, and I love the consortium that's coming about. But look, so Sam, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is just the fact that I think that, I've described Deel as a unicorn on a rocket ship, right? You guys have absolutely positively become the darling of the industry in a lot of ways, right? You've raced to the top of the charts. Your valuation is what, like 12 plus billion now, I think 13 billion.
That's right.
Yeah. Phenomenal. I mean, it's just amazing. And your founders, I've talked to Alex and I know that their vision for.
Hello, I'm Ruth Thomas, host of Comp and Coffee, where we break down what's next in the world of compensation management. From pay transparency to performance alignment, we explore how businesses are rethinking compensation to drive impact, equity, and growth. So if you're shaping the future of pay at your organization, grab a cup and tune in. Listen on the Work Defined Podcast Network.
I believe they call it becoming the Apple of HR. I love that. I love that concept, right? That one-stop shop concept. But that's come with some criticism, right? And I know that's come with, the market being critical of your success, there being some informed and maybe even some misinformed commentary coming out. I've even been critical of Deel being a little bit walled off and not allowing analysts to get closer, which you guys have completely opened up and started to do that with me, which I love. But talk to me a little bit about that rocket ship rise. And then I know there was a recent blog you guys put out to kind of set the record straight about what's going on at Deel. And I'd love for you to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about that, kind of how we got here, where we are, and what that means and where you're headed.
Yeah. So I can talk. I mean, first, I can answer your first question is, in my opinion, and I think that this rocket ship can be probably explained by the fact that, again, we're solving a labor law problem, but we're also helping many smaller businesses to use hiring tools that was never available to them. I mean, we're talking about a small to medium-sized company. They can now hire pretty much anyone, anywhere, and it really levels the playing field for every organization, which is something that was not possible before. Only the large companies and had the ability to set up a full-fledged legal entity, hire a legal team elsewhere. So I think that, in my opinion, that explained this massive growth. Obviously, there are many other factors like COVID, the fact that remote work has become very much accepted. I mean, now there's a bit of a battle with the return to work to the office policies, but it's become much more the new normal. And I think at the same time also the fact that our founders are very mission driven, and they are very much aligned with the idea that we can find a way to help employers to remain compliant, but also that's going to be helpful for the workers. And I think that goes back to your second question, which is that, okay, there's been some allegations recently. I'm not a litigator, so I'm not a litigator anymore, so I'm not going to respond in detail to each of these allegations. But for me, as with my academic hat, and also as a policy analyst, it's a bit odd because these allegations are very much at odds with our mission. And I mean, let's just take the main one is that Deel is encouraging companies to violate employment laws intentionally. That's the second one. I mean, in law, so I mean, first, I'm always interested to look at evidence, but here it seems like many of these allegations are unfounded. I haven't seen anything that seems convincing to me. But that's a separate discussion. But when you think about it, I mean, this whole idea is very much at odds with the rationale of the company. And also, even from a business standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense. For us, I mean, we've got, it's much more, that's the whole core essence of the business, is to help companies to classify workers in the right legal category. So encouraging employers or client companies to hire only contractors makes very little sense from a business standpoint, because I mean we've worked really hard, at least my colleagues or the founders of the company worked really hard to build this amazing panel or array of tools, especially for full-time employees, the employer of record, immigration tools. Now we've got this misclassification tools. So, and that was way before this debate. I mean, we've been working on this algorithm, this machine learning system that can predict with 95% accuracy whether a worker is an employee or contractor. And we've been investing a lot of resources in that. And we've been publishing all our data. The tool and the algorithms are open source. So even it is very easy to verify, to assess the quality of the prediction. So I'm just a little bit puzzled in general by these allegations, because they don't really make sense from a business standpoint as well.
Yeah, no, it is counter when you read it. It is a bit counter to what you're fundamentally trying to build towards. So I would second that with you, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are leaning into this, right, and having this conversation, because I've been one of the biggest pushers of Deel opening up and talking to the market, and then I think that's great that you guys are doing that. So really appreciate that. So look, Samuel, let's go back to the lab a little bit, right? Let's talk about why is this so important to the marketplace? I know why it's important, but I want you to explain it, because I think that the fact that what we've talked about, the fact that, and let's even back up a step further, right? I mean, bigger than global expansion, right? Not every company is necessarily has that ambition, but every company on the planet, to your point, the big companies have probably had the advantage here, but every company on the planet today really needs to be thinking well beyond their borders when it comes to hiring. If you want to have the best skills, if you're going to be the most competitive and you're going to be able to activate your strategy, you're going to have people. And that means going and finding them, right? And just recruiting inside of your 50-mile radius is just no longer enough. So a total talent strategy really has to be in play, I think, where there's a mix of worker types and locations that you can go and pull that pool from. And so I think you're going to see more and more firms, dipping their toe into this world, and they need that vehicle to help them do that. And I think that the EOR model is exactly that. But as we have more and more and more firms going out to market, I think the value and the key importance here is that there aren't these established laws necessarily perfectly for this type of mechanism. And how do we make sure that we educate and provide the tools that give that marketplace the opportunity to have that? But is that it, or is it a bigger part? Is there a bigger importance at the marketplace that you see it?
Yeah, I think you're pointing out the real issue. I think the fact that the laws are not necessarily suitable to the market needs. I mean, there's a mismatch between where the labor market is going, and the policies and the regulations. So, and I'm talking really especially, for example, about the EOR and how this is an issue that's not even discussed yet So that's one problem. The second problem, so that's where, but that's an interesting question. That's a policy question, right? But at the same time, for companies, we can complain as much as we want that there's a lack of policies, there's a mismatch between them. But at the same time, we need to be compliant, right? You want to hire someone, you got to you got to be compliant with the law. Okay. So our job as I would call Deel an HR facilitator or an HR intermediator. Our job is to help these companies to be compliant with the law. And that's what that's where the lab is stepping in. So we are building HR compliance tools and hope very soon in 120 countries. So I can tell you a little bit about this AI system that we've been building actually since 2020. So I started this initiative back at the university, and back in the day in 2015, that was a very sexy thing to use machine learning to predict court decisions. So we used misclassification decision in Canada, okay, where I'm based, and we tried to use machine learning to predict judges' decision when it came to worker classification, and we found out that we were able to predict judge's decision with 95% accuracy.
Oh, wow.
The algorithm was capable of explaining the reason as to why it came up with that decision, and also it extracts similar past cases. So again, like the idea is that it's explainable, it's legitimate, unlike generative AI, which offers decisions that usually are unfounded. So and now the idea is that we transfer this research to Deel Lab, and now the idea is that we want to make this research and eventually this AI tool available to obviously all Deel's clients, but we want to make it open access as well, and help client companies to, every time they hire a worker, to guarantee that they're hiring this worker and they classify this worker in the right legal category. So very soon, this AI algorithm is going to be available probably in the next few months in the fall, and eventually we'll probably going to deploy this tool in other legal systems as we make progress.
Wow, I love it. So it sounds like fundamentally you're basically using artificial intelligence to look at case law and say, well, maybe in the absence of a law here or a specific piece of law around this, we know with confidence what judges will or won't do based on these outcomes, right? And that can shape your guidance. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, yes. So it's quite important for us, to understand the law first, right? We want to do policy. We want to influence where policy is going. But first, you got to be compliant, right?
Yes.
As I said before, we can just talk about, oh, this law is not great and so on. But, you're hiring someone, you've got to give them award termination compensation, as you do, that's compliant with what the law stipulates. So there's no way around that. But that research, interestingly, is going to help us to steer the policy reforms in the right direction. So let me give you an example that we currently we've identified. So in the context of worker classification, we see now that it's becoming harder for the algorithm to predict outcome in a binary fashion. More and more, we've got cases where, for a similar set of facts, 5 judges would say this person is a contractor, and 3 judges in other jurisdiction, in other provinces or in other states in the U.S., for example, say actually this person is an employee. So what this suggests, and from a policy perspective, but that's a data-driven argument, what this suggests is that judges are really struggling, and there is a change in the labor market that suggests that it's becoming harder. This binary classification doesn't make a lot of sense. So maybe we should think about a third category, like it exists in Canada, like exists in Spain, and in other places, which is called a dependent contractor, which is a little bit in between. So I think it's very important to see these compliance technology not only as a tool for compliance, which is very important, but also as a vehicle for policy change, because we'll see from the data that things are changing in the labor market and the law doesn't make a lot of sense. So maybe we have to reflect on new law reforms.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's doing that kind of heavy lift of sorting through this stuff, right? I mean, I love the role of AI in our world, that it's getting to getting down to that result and saying, look, these are the results that you're going to likely get in this set of circumstances. So do you see using this output? Obviously you want to use it, I'm sure, to shape your product. I'm sure it's going to help the market. But what about lobbying? Do you see an opportunity to take this and lobby with governments to say, hey, this is a vehicle to make this safe for your people to be employed?
Hey, everybody. I'm Lori Rudiman. What are you doing? Working? Nah, you're listening to a podcast about work, and that barely counts. So while you're at it, check out my show, Punk Rock HR, now on the Work Defined Network. We chat with smart people about work, power, politics, and money. Are we succeeding? Are we fixing work? Probably not. Work still sucks, but tune in for some fun, a little nonsense, and a fresh take on how to fix work once and for all.
Optimize your business with a Workforce AI Edge powered by Visier. Make smarter decisions and achieve better outcomes with real-time AI insights delivered to every people leader. Explore more at visier.com.
I don't know, but I think probably lobbying may not be the best approach, but I'd say engaging in a discussion on how the laws of misclassification should evolve. It's something that hasn't really evolved. I mean, in 100 years, and markets has gone through many industrial revolutions and this hasn't changed that much. I mean, the rules, the case law has changed a little bit, but not that much. I think what's really fascinating is that also for worker classification is that it's usually a legal issue that's not very much litigated. Why is that? Because a lot of people don't know that they're misclassified. A lot of companies don't even know that they misclassify workers, right? They just think, I'm just going to hire that person as a contractor because, they have their own company. But that doesn't really or because the contract says so. I mean, the law is a little bit smarter than that. It doesn't look at the contract. It looks at the nature of the relationship. So what I'm hoping for is that such tools will disseminate the knowledge and help companies to really understand a little bit better the risks. So now I'm very excited about this new product because we've been with one of our Deel's prospective client that has more than 30,000 employees with a combination of another algorithm that reads the contract plus a combination of a questionnaire. We've been able to assess the risk of misclassification for 30,000 workers at the same time.
Wow,
so that's
brilliant.
quite important because back in the day, I mean, even a couple of years ago, no companies can do that. It's too complex. It requires too much resources. So with that kind of new tools or research, we can do that we can answer this question in a much more efficient way. So, and it's great for workers and it's great for also companies because it alleviates the risk tremendously.
Yeah, with confidence too, which I love. I think that's the best part. Yeah, here in America, we have the NAPEO, right? The National Association of Professional Employer Organizations. And I think that's something that's lacking for the EOR model. It doesn't have that industry group that's lobbying for them. And I think that's something that would be very helpful. And in the absence of that, this is where this case law is going to be so helpful for shaping that, I think, for more firms, and not just for Deel, but for other companies trying to operate in these locations too. So right. It's good for the marketplace, and I think that's what's exciting. So tell me a little bit more about the lab. Like, who are the members? I believe there's a number of universities involved. Yeah, like, how do you guys staff it, and who runs it? Like, how does that work?
So it is. It is so it was established in last year in the fall, so it's almost a year old. So there are a few universities involved, there are a few colleagues involved from INSEAD, HEC, obviously in Canada there's Queen's, there's McGill, there's Cornell. So the idea is to put together a team of independent experts. So many of them are not working for Deel. So I'm chairing the lab, and I'm trying to steer the ship in a different direction. Yes. But it's hard to manage academics. Everyone has to go in their direction. But the idea is to identify. For us, our role is to identify an interesting industry problem. And provide data to these colleagues. So now we're working with a colleague at Stanford who is interested in looking at digital nomads, just measuring the number of digital nomads, if there's maybe a correlation between digital nomad visas and the rise of digital nomads. So these are important questions, and we very much want to share the data that we've gathered both on regulation, but also labor movement, labor mobility data, just to and again to steer to encourage a discussion on global work.
Yeah. Do you have like a set of countries that you're looking at first, next, and later, or are you kind of how do you pick where you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, for example, for worker classification, we looked at the countries that has the most advanced regulation in that area, because we want to tackle the complex problem first and then go for the easier ones later. But I think also for from a more economic standpoint, an economic research standpoint, I think a lot of the research is very much global. It's driven mostly by where the interesting data is. So for example, a few months ago, I was looking at an interesting question, which is the fact that the U.S. is becoming the hottest labor market for global workers. Okay. So I wasn't looking at the U.S. because it's the U.S. I'm just looking at the U.S. because it's a very interesting question, that there are so many U.S. workers working for non-American companies. And the more interesting fact was that a lot of the organizations hiring these workers were based in Mexico. So I thought it was a very interesting pattern that has never happened before. So we looked at that issue, and I think we are trying to write a paper about this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we talked, right, I think there's going to be more of engagement of the gig worker. And you're right, the digital nomad elements, right? It seems like there's always new countries popping up that are offering those. And I know I personally, right, my wife and I are even looking at that. I'm exploring my citizenship in Greece by way of my heritage. And we're looking at, potential retirement locations at some point. So there's a lot of reasons why, you know what I mean? You'd go globally. And look, I was just doing some work on EOR recently, writing, and I was reading that Mercer, they came out with their global talent trends in 2023. They had 96% of organizations expecting to redesign the HR function with more quote agile resources. 60% of executive expected gig workers were going to replace traditional full-time workers substantially in their operating model. So this doesn't show any signs of slowing down. I love that there's, this vehicle out there, but also that you're underpinning it with the work to say, like, look, not only is it a vehicle, but it's a compliant vehicle, and we've proven it by way of this case law. So I think it's going to be a win-win for not just your brand, but also others, in this market. So Samuel, one thing, Julie and I always are talking about the latest tech here. We've had a lot of conversations recently about artificial intelligence and generative AI and large language models. And one of the areas that we know and we see a lot of opportunity is in compliance, right? There's so much going on. It's moving. It's a moving target constantly. If you're a global payroll practitioner, you've got to really keep your eye on a lot of balls, right? A lot of targets. Yeah. Talk to me about what generative AI is doing in your walls and how that's going to help, facilitate what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, well, that's a very important question. It's not something we're working with my colleagues at Deel Lab. It's more of a theoretical problem that I'm working with my colleagues at the computer science department. I'm happy to talk about this. So, generative AI, my short answer, especially for HR compliance, so using generative AI, so like the ChatGPT, the Bard, and so on, my short answer would be never use it.
Yeah,
it hallucinates half of the time. Most of the solutions or answers it provides are unfounded, and the way it is trained, it is incompatible with providing decent legal answers or even compliance. Basic. Yeah. So there's a jurisdictional problem and so on. The other question also is, and I know that's a internal policies that many law firms have implemented both in Canada and the US and most global firms, that every time you input a question, it becomes their data. So you don't want to end up asking legal questions to a general AI. So that's where. So my recommendation for now is to fall back on predictive AI tools like the one we're building, but there are many others. There are many, Thomson Reuters have created a lot of very interesting tools in many areas. So these tools, like the drawback is that these tools are very are kind of what we would call linear. They are narrow, so they answer one question: are you a contractor? Are you an employee? But they're very reliable. So if they answer a question, usually it's like very high accuracy, and also it's explainable. So that's quite important. However, I'm not saying generative AI is a dead cause. In fact, I mean, my lab at the Conflict Analytics Lab at the university, which is one of the main collaborator of the Deel Lab and Deel in general. So we're working on an open source legal AI for employment, but also for other. And it has already been adopted by 15 universities in North America. So
beautiful.
And the idea is that it's not a foundational model. We call this a fine-tuned legal AI. So we basically make sure that it doesn't have any data that it doesn't need to have. Everything is filtered and it's trained for law. So it doesn't work perfectly yet, but eventually I think many of these tools will be rolled out to the HR industry. I know Deel has its own. We're working on our own generative AI internally, but that's more for general HR questions. So I think my answer would be just we have to be a little bit patient to see reliable tools being rolled out in the next few months, maybe year. It depends. I mean, the industry is moving fast.
Yeah. So your work at the Deel Lab is more in the predictive AI versus generative at this stage, is what you're saying?
That's right. Yeah. I think the generative AI, so it's more experimental and it's more theoretical.
Yes,
but a little
it's
bit
early.
Like we predict as my work in predictive AI was in 2015. But eventually, when it's going to be ready, we'll probably roll it out to the Deel Lab as well.
Yeah. Generative is very exciting, right? I mean, Julie and I talk about it with our guests a lot. We talk about it in different areas, but it is nascent, right? It is very young and it's growing up, but it offers a lot of great promise. So exciting stuff. So look, when can we begin to sort of see the output or the results or the work that's happening at the Deel Lab? I mean, are you publishing anything? I know you guys have a report you put out, I believe recently you've put one out in spring, but what else? What all can we expect to see coming out of it?
Yeah, so in terms of more classic research, so we've got a state of
Are you tired of talent and HR podcasts that sound like corporate training videos? Same. Talentless is the no-fluff show about hiring, leadership, culture, and what's actually going on in the world of work. Talentless is a podcast for recruiters by recruiters. Hosted by Desiree Goldie and Ashley King, they're smart, occasionally salty, and never afraid to say what everyone else is thinking. Listen wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe at talentlesspodcast.com.
A paper, more of a legal paper on the state of global work law that came out in the winter. We've got a global hiring report coming out every year. And we've got a series of papers. So I'm working on with a couple of colleagues on, as I said, digital nomad and immigration, equity compensation. In fact, I'm also putting together a book on global work law, trying to identify both the regional challenges and the substantive challenges related to global work law. So, but that's more for the classic, research output. But we're also rolling out this AI system for classification of workers. So by October, November, we'll be able to we'll deploy the global classification algorithm. So that means it will be capable of predicting worker status in about 120 countries. So,
wow.
and slowly will make it as explainable as possible. So first, it will be able to provide the case law in 15 countries by the end of this the fall, and as we make progress, we'll make it as accurate, as precise as possible. But as soon as, so for Deel client, it's going to be slightly different. Deel client, we're building a system that will automatically, every time they onboard a client, that's really exciting. We found a way to do this. It's actually quite tricky, but it's a problem that I think we might be able to crack. So every time they will onboard a client, and it could be as many as five workers, as many as 30,000 workers, the system might be able to read the contract and identify the risk. And then if there's a risk of misclassification, we'll send to our deal lawyers. But in general, these algorithms, this tool will be available to the general public, so anybody can use this global classification algorithm. And eventually, once we're done with that, I'm hoping to tackle all the issues like termination compensation, even termination settlement, I think, or wage theft. There are many issues, like many compliance tech system that we can build in this space.
Yeah. Offboarding and outplacement seems to be an area that I noticed becoming more prevalent as well from that scope. So yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it sounds like obviously the marketplace is going to benefit from this, I think shaping a point of view around what a compliant engagement looks like at the country level. But more importantly, it sounds like your clients are really going to benefit. And I love it sounds almost like an auditing of their classification at the point of, at many points of engagement. So I really love that. So what else? What's the future of the Deel Lab? Where do you guys go from here? You continue to do this work. Do you add more members? Like, what does it look like? What's your plan?
So our next step is really to add more industry partners. Obviously, more academic partners. That's great as well. But we would love to also work with industry stakeholders, not necessarily in the HR space, but sure as well. But who also are looking at these issues, for example, equity compensation, stocks, or tax. And I know there are many organizations, I hope there are many organizations out there that are looking at these issues. And my take on this is we should collaborate and try to produce as much knowledge as possible in this area in order to implement reforms that make sense for both workers and employers. And right now, the thing is that there's nothing, right? There's not much going on. And when I say nothing, it's an understatement, really. I mean, I know in our space, there's a lot of people who are very much aware of what are the ins and outs of EOR. But in many areas, in many circles, especially in my world, like of employment lawyers and especially employment law academics, it's not yet a topic of and as you said earlier, I don't think we want to wait for a disaster.
Yes.
And maybe if there is one day, what happened pretty much in the gig economy, right? We waited a little bit too late, too much. And then what happened is that we ended up making decisions through Supreme Courts, which is not good. I mean, if you end up for a case to make it, to come up to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, usually it's a last resort. And I think it might be best to engage as soon as possible on these issues and start implementing reforms that make sense. So that's the policy side. But on the tech side, I think my vision of the Deel Lab is to build a full-fledged compliance system, but not only for misclassification. I think there are so many legal issues. At my lab at the university, we've developed a tool to assess, harassment claims, to assess, the validity of wage theft claim, wage theft, whether a layoff is legal, whether there's termination compensation is owed. So there are many tools that are quite important, and many HR professionals or companies don't really have the resources to consult with the lawyer on these issues.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the speed of which those things happen, that's another thing I think that gets overlooked with EOR is the speed of acting on your plans, right? The ability to do that with agility and confidence and know that you're doing it the right way in a proper compliant vehicle is absolutely peace of mind. So I love it. And look, I kind of, I say this a lot. I talk about, I try to coach vendors to, rising tides raise all boats, right? And I think, the responsibility of protecting this model is the responsibility of the entire marketplace. So I'd love to see more firms investing in these kind of, market benefiting. I certainly know it benefits Deel's product, and I certainly know it'll benefit you guys. But I think it also benefits the marketplace. And that's something that I love about this concept. So thank you for what you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it. Okay. How can we engage with the Deel Lab? I know lab.deel.com, but what else? How else can we engage there, Samuel?
Yeah, that's what I mean. For employers or even workers who are concerned about HR compliance questions, I mean, we'll be rolling out a lot of the tools, so they're very much welcome to use this, our research and the technology systems we're building. I'm very much a believer of open systems, but more generally, also for collaborators, I'm very much keen to talk to other companies in the HR space, but also outside the HR space, who want to collaborate with us, maybe work with our data, also share their experience and findings on global work. And this could be related to labor mobility, so immigration, could be tax, could be IP, could be equity compensation, pensions benefit. I'm very much eager to establish almost a community around this HR or around global work. So if they are interested, they can reach out to me on through LinkedIn, email, or through the Deel website. That's very much something. And I know this is as you said, this is an important question for the HR community and workers as well, beyond the beyond Deel's product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to benefit this marketplace and workers, right? I mean, I call it a human opportunity enabler. It really is. And I want to see more opportunity connected to resources. And so this is great stuff. And I'll definitely share all the links to your LinkedIn and your Twitter, Samuel. And again, you can reach, I'll put the website in here. There's the Deel Lab at lab.deel.com, as well as a misclassification assessment tool that is hosted on the Deel Lab that I think, folks can certainly try out and check that out. And I'll also give the links to the Global Hiring Report that you guys publish. But Samuel, thank you so much. Anything else that you'd like to share or promote anywhere you're going to be? You want to have anyone call attention to? Now's the chance.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having us, for having me on this podcast. It was a very very interesting conversation. Now, as for my last thought, I mean, we are. I'm going to be at the International Bar Association in November. I'm organizing a panel on global work with representatives of the French government, the European Court of Human Rights. So if there are any employment lawyers that are going to be in Paris, I'd be happy to connect there. I think that's probably the biggest, that's probably an interesting opportunity for all of us to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good stuff. Julie, where are you going to be next? What's going on in your world?
Yeah, I am gearing up to be in Las Vegas September 13th and 14th primarily for the Shared Services and Outsourcing Week. So super excited about that.
Yeah.
And still trekking to a lot of client transformations, which is my sweet spot and kind of my passion in this industry. And I just thank you so much, Samuel. The conversation was fascinating, and I know I'll be excited to kind of watch as you guys were talking. I was thinking about, which countries or how are you choosing and prioritizing countries. And so I can't wait to, watch and see how that unfolds. And I also was struck by the fact that, you're super credentialed, and it's such an interesting thought for me as we promote the HR and payroll professions to think about how folks that have an inclination toward legal and compliance, but specifically from the legal perspective, might actually find that the HR space is incredibly challenging and robust and dynamic. And I'm so glad you fell into it and have picked that up and taken the ball and run, because it's just another way to get into this crazy mess of an industry, right? That we all find ourselves in.
So, Samuel, there's a little bit of an inside joke there. We often ask people when they come on the show. I love to ask, how did you get into the space, and why do you stay? Mostly it's practitioners and executives and that sort of thing that are functioning, day to day, maybe not on the fringe of like law. And you'd be surprised at how many people will say, I needed a job, so and they ended up in HR, which is kind of negative. But then you're like, well, it's great that they actually make their way here. So you found your way to HR, and we're thankful for that.
Yeah, no, but that's a very interesting space. I mean,
it is.
It's funny how employment lawyers and HR professionals don't really talk that much, but at the same time, now realize, I mean, maybe what I'm going to say is going to make a lot of employment lawyers unhappy. I find the HR space much more dynamic than the legal space. So I think I'm going to stay.
That's what I'm thinking. And, I have to say, even as a practitioner, organizationally, especially in mid-sized organizations, I find that I've worked with many organizations whose head of HR is also responsible for the legal organization. And so I see organizationally at some of the top levels, a combination and an acknowledgement there that there's so much happening in employment law that there's, that there is a bridge that's not too far. So fun stuff.
Yeah, it is. And this is important work. I mean, we need these tools, right? I mean, it's like the hero we didn't know we needed for global employment was EOR, who knew? So it's fantastic to see that we're progressing that. So
how about you, Pete? Where are you going to be next?
Everywhere. I think the biggest thing I want to point to is National Payroll Week is next week, Julie. I don't know if you know that or not. It's going to be the 5th through the 9th. I think it is Tuesday to which is fitting, right? Labor Day, Labor Week. So National Payroll Week. Thank you to all the payroll practitioners around the world that keep us all paid. And obviously it's a recognition for the U.S., but I would say payroll practitioners everywhere. There's going to be so much going on. I'm doing some special things, so stay close to my channels. I can't share what that is yet. And then, of course, we're heading out on the road as well. I'll be at every probably major tech event this fall season: ADP, iSolve, Ceridian, SAP, HR Tech, Money 2020, you name it. So really looking forward to that. And I will be I just found out I'll be at Workday Rising in the US and Europe. So very, very excited for that. So thank you, Workday. And thank you again, Sam, for coming on. I really appreciate this. This is great. I'd love to bring you back at some point and talk about this in the future, about what's going on. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, take care, and we'll be back soon.